Welcome to the Programming Electronics Academy podcast. Join us every other week as we explore how everyday people are creating extraordinary things in the world. Find us online at programmingelectronics.com.
Hello, this is Michael with Programming Electronics Academy. Thank you so much for joining me this week. We have a really interesting guest. His name is Trent Shumay. He's a man of many talents. He started a company called Finger Food Studios back in 2009, and they did mostly mobile application development. But recently, they started a startup inside of their company called the IoT Design Shop. And we're going to talk about one of the projects that they're working on there called the FizViz. It's kind of a way, kind of a medium for representing information that would normally be kind of stuck in the internet, kind of bringing it out and displaying it for people to see in a really interesting way. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the show. Well, Trent, thanks so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Really glad to be here.
And, we reached out to you because we actually found your team's project on Hackster.io. It's a physical visualization project, and it's really rather interesting, called FizViz. But, as we started to kind of investigate what your team is up to and the stuff, we found out about a lot of neat stuff you guys are doing. And so I just wanted to kind of maybe start by learning a little bit about your background and how you came around to getting into stuff like FizViz.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's actually really interesting, sort of the origins of our group and the IoT Design Shop in particular. So I started a company a number of years ago called Finger Food Studios, which was primarily a mobile developer at the time, doing lots of iOS and Android and things like that. And as that market matured, we started thinking about things that would make sense to kind of branch out or add on to our offerings, and really got interested particularly in the Internet of Things. Initially, a lot of Bluetooth Low Energy work. So it was a natural fit on top of our interest in smartphones and stuff. Obviously, the Bluetooth Low Energy was sort of the gateway for a lot of early IoT devices that were low power and things like that. So we found the interests were quite complementary. But my group is basically an internal startup. So we had a slightly different mandate in the sense that what we were really looking for was new opportunities where we might use sort of IoT concepts and technology to combine physical and digital, so that we can look at, unique interactions between the physical world and the digital world, and sort of back and forth. At the time, a lot of IoT was almost kind of novelty, or there was a lot of home automation, things like that. But we were always thinking a little bit deeper than that in terms of where we might bring meaningful connections between the physical world and digital world. So, and that's what the group stays focused on today. It takes us in a lot of different directions, but our general sort of guiding principle is physical digital interaction.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool. So could you kind of tell us about the FizViz then? Maybe kind of explain what the project is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where FizViz started from was actually, and I think a lot of great projects start this way, it was actually out of our own internal interest. We had built a product that we crowdfunded a few years ago, almost a few years ago now, called Signal. And one of the things about it was that I was sort of at the helm always in terms of watching the analytics or the sales or the interest or the website sort of spikes and visits and all those other things that, as an entrepreneur, you're excited about, whether they're sort of big or small. In our case, it was a smaller product, but still there was a lot of information there. And one of the challenges, though, was that things that I would see or be excited about or whatever, we didn't really have a way for the rest of the team to participate, even though we were a fairly small team, other than me all of a sudden getting excited at my desk because we had a bunch of people visiting the website or whatever. And so out of that kind of came this idea that maybe you could build some physical widgets that were connected to the internet that you would hook up to things that matter to you, whether it's, in our case, sales or web visits, but other people have talked about using it for things like, build breaks or the number of bugs you have, or if you have open issues reported on your GitHub project, things like that, where this, physical gauge on your wall in your office or your workshop could alert you to things that were happening on the internet, or metrics that you were interested in. So that was where the idea kind of started, and we really imagined that really this could be a whole suite of products or ideas in terms of we sort of chose the rotary gauge with the lights and stuff as one version, but obviously linear gauges or other types of lighting and alerts and stuff make a ton of sense for different applications. So we picked one to start with, to prototype, and then but kind of kept the idea open that down the road people would probably do different things with this too.
Yeah, that's such a cool idea. So this is like, it's almost, the FizViz is almost like a platform in and of itself, and then that's kind of the widgets. You could just multiple types of widgets that kind of get enabled by that back end almost.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And in the case of the project on Hackster.io, it was, hey, let's kind of do a baseline for getting it connected to Google Analytics, and then to a Windows application, obviously, and so we started with that. And then proved out the concept, and we're certainly hoping that people may take that and go farther with it, or have different ideas and stuff. But it was really to kind of show that pathway to get data through the whole system and into a physical widget. Since then, we've done a bit of work in terms of moving some of the logic into the FizViz itself, because obviously, on the Arduino side, with the project's based on the Maker 1000, but on the Arduino side, you're fully capable of running a web server and stuff as well. So we've also got a version in house that we've been playing with that has a web server running right on the FizViz itself. So then it basically exposes a bit of a REST API that you can push data to. So we've sort of kind of work the different angles on it, where there's the version that connects to Windows and via a Windows application, as well as a version where the web server is hosted right on the FizViz itself.
Oh wow, okay, that's cool. So the current widget, this current incarnation of the FizViz, it's the Rotomodo, and like you said, it's kind of like a gauge, kind of it almost appears like a clock, but it's kind of like a I don't know, I used to call them like steam gauges, as opposed to like a digital gauge. And I just love the analog appeal. And, we'll make sure to link to the video that you guys have up in the several different places you have it. But you did it so elegantly. I mean, it just looks so nice. And, I'll just try to paint a picture here of what it looks like. But there's a lot of LED lighting, RGB LED lighting. I think you use the NeoPixels, is that right? Like the Adafruit NeoPixel or NeoPixel string, and
yeah, that's correct.
And what's so cool about it though is, as the if you can imagine, somebody can imagine a gauge, or it's showing 0 to whatever. I mean, there aren't numbers on it, so it's a relative thing. But as the dial turns, it interacts with the lights around the ring, and it does it so smooth. It's just so neat. And I didn't pick that up when I first saw that, and then I realized, oh wow, that's so neat how those lights interact. So, was that a challenge to code, or is that something that, like, a user who would be using this, is that something they can kind of play around with? Is that the idea that they're adjusting that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually really interesting. You nailed a bunch of things there. There's definitely challenges in there, because the rate at which we're animating the LEDs and doing some of the lighting effects and stuff, obviously we've got a fairly high update rate in there to make those animations and the lighting effect so smooth and whatnot. And so one of the big challenges was basically, sort of, obviously you're on a single threaded, single task-based system in Arduino, but we had to make sure that we were time slicing our loop effectively so that we could maintain a very high update rate to drive the effects on the LEDs so they would stay smooth. But we're also driving a stepper motor there because the needle obviously is analog, and so then we're interpolating steps and whatnot to keep the needle motion smooth, plus any connectivity or web access that needs to be serviced in the loop as well. So the code is up there, and it's kind of an interesting study because there's essentially 3 loops running in there that are kind of sharing time so that you're not starving the update rate on the LEDs primarily. They get priority because to maintain that kind of smooth persistence and color sort of animations and things like that, very, very high update rate. And then stepper is obviously very important because we can't overshoot our targets and things like that. And you don't want to lose connectivity. So it's a bit of a juggling act on the software side, but obviously the code is there with the project so people can have a look at how it works and probably get ideas from that. We find historically that the key thing is to, as I said, basically make sure the LEDs have priority so that you can get those smooth effects and blends and stuff between the colors.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. And, as I really love the idea of having, that whole gambit of widgets that you could throw up there. I think of, different places I've worked where they do the fundraiser for like the Red Cross or whatever, maybe the company fundraiser where, they've got that poster on the wall and, the secretary goes out and marks, in red, oh, we've met this goal. And, that'd be fun to have kind of something like that on the wall to really bring it to life, make it more of a, as opposed to the poster, taped to the wall. It's, something that really kind of like draws people in, draws their attention, and I guess gets people excited about maybe mundane to some people information, maybe not mundane. It depends on, who's looking at it. But
yeah, that's the key thing. Actually, you just nailed it. Is for an organization where you might have sort of a variety of data points, whether it was for a fundraiser or whether it was your analytics or your metrics and stuff. Currently, a lot of that data kind of gets obscured or is only visible to certain people in the company. And, some data is like that, but a lot of the times it's really just people haven't had a mechanism to share that with everybody. And these large physical widgets, I think, create that opportunity where it's like, hey, this is a metric that matters to us. We're fundraising or we're, trying to achieve a crowdfunding goal, or we're doing a big project and we want to get our bug count down to 0, whatever it is. It allows you to share that data with a bigger group of people than the people normally just running the terminal or hitting refresh in the browser.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said this is the second quote unquote real project, and those are your own words there on the website. But what were some of the big challenges you hit when you were getting it prototyped?
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, is there's sort of 2. I mean, the mechanical, obviously, we shot pretty high end in terms of what we were going to be able to produce in-house. We have, we're lucky. I mean, we're fortunate. We have access to a lot of great machines and stuff, but the process of generating the mechanical sort of for the FizViz was kind of problematic, especially production of that big translucent bezel that goes around the edge of it. That basically gets CNC'd out of a solid piece of plexiglass, which we had to tweak quite a bit in order to get the quality and the particularly the kind of translucent effect we wanted. The second one was that the housing of the device itself, the kind of part that holds the needle, holds the bezel and stuff together, of course, was just ever so slightly larger than our biggest 3D printer bed. So you end up printing in pieces and fusing the stuff together. So there's a bit of handwork. So definitely mechanical. The other one that was trickier than we thought was finding a stepper motor that would be both, relatively cost effective and have enough torque to drive the needle at a pretty good clip. Because we really thought one of the cool effects would be that needle really swings around, if you have, rapid changes to your data and stuff. So we really wanted to feature that. And that one ended up being a little bit of a compromise in the sense that we did find a great stepper, which is really low profile and thin, but it was more expensive than we would have liked. So that was sort of the trade-off was, power versus cost on it. We did a second rev of the FizViz that was a little bit smaller. So we thought after learning what we learned on the first one, we realized that if we were going to make more of these, for our office or things like that we were going to have to compromise a little bit on those things. So mechanically, we shrunk the internal housing a little bit so that it would fit on our TAS 5, and then we found a stepper that is slightly lower torque, slightly less impressive from a speed perspective, but allowed us to kind of direct drive the needle instead of having the belt drive assembly that we had for the bigger stepper, and that let us shrink down the sort of build and footprint as well. So we've got a smaller one that we've built now that makes it a little bit easier for us to reproduce them when we need to. But those are sort of the key takeaways. The software, obviously, getting the timing of everything right, and then I think the progression from driving it with the Windows app via Fermata and towards the web server also gave us another interesting angle there, because a lot of people have stats, and data that they would like to just display and don't necessarily want to do the run it off on another computer, right? So that was a good step forward too.
And so just to give everybody an idea, the one that, is on Hackster.io is a big display. It's almost the size of a poster. I feel like, it's
right.
And I feel like that needle really pops, in my opinion. It moves quick. It almost took me by surprise. But that's awesome. So the one you just mentioned, the smaller one, is it more of a, what's the diameter on it?
Yeah, it's I believe our big one is probably at 16 to 18 inches, kind of like you say, but the small one's about 14 inches. So it's not significantly smaller, but it was just enough to tuck everything into the footprint and the available area on a 12-inch print bed in particular.
Right. So is the vision then that somebody could get one of these and then they could connect it to various different data streams would be the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. And the one that I think is interesting is that there is definitely the option to kind of reverse the flow too. So our first concept, which we built out, was that there'd either be something driving the FizViz, so there'd be a PC, or there'd be something making web service calls to it. An interesting one that I want to explore a bit more in the future is to have the FizViz pull the data itself. So if you did have an existing web service or something that you just wanted to pull, to have a little parser in there that could hit the web service and parse the JSON response or whatever. Because I think that's quite powerful too, because if you get the thing on the internet and then you've coded a data parser for your data source, then it becomes somewhat self-contained, which is really a kind of a cool direction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's because I guess you can think of a lot of different applications for these types of widgets. I mean, even if it was something like you felt like displaying wind velocity in an interesting way, and you just hook it up to your local, NOAA, like data feed or something like that, and kind of get that visualization. And I don't know, it seems like
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's super powerful because there is so much data out there today and so many different services and stuff that, simplifying that down a bit and just having the direct connection is very, very powerful.
So are you thinking you're going to do like a crowdfunding campaign for this, or have you already, or are you thinking, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question because we were sort of debating that ourselves when we went to Maker Faire with it. We've it's such an there's so much eye candy there and interest from people and so many different ideas we've heard in terms of how they might apply it. And we were kind of debating, sort of what the next steps are because I think you could go to market with, ideally if we designed a few more widgets, probably a linear gauge of some sort, and maybe a different form of numerical or rotational thing, and you had two or three different options for people for their applications. Then there's a platform there that I think becomes interesting as a product itself. Currently, obviously, we've sort of done the prototype. We've shown people how to do it and how to replicate it. But a lot of people, the audience is bigger for an end user solution or something that you could just buy and hang up and connect. So we're sort of debating that. I mean, we're kind of open to ideas in terms of where it should go next. I think product wise and crowdfunding, we've gone down that route before and had success, and this one is probably worth having a look at. I think open source or a platform or some sort of community where people could contribute different widgets to it and different connectors is interesting to us. I think, and beyond that, it's really hard to say sort of where it should go, but we're actively thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it seems like it becomes more appealing to a broader audience as more connections are created for it, more data connections. Like you mentioned, having that open source community, because I could imagine someone says, well, maybe I want it to do something when, maybe it counts the number of emails that come in or the number, there's just this endless number of things you could have displayed. But, all those things need some type of interface designed for them. I guess I think of like Zapier, or what is it, IFTT or if this, then that, kind of a bunch of different of those, drawn up essentially so that people could kind of pick and choose through a library of them almost.
Yeah, I think that would be ideal, and actually something like Zapier or if this and that is probably a really interesting target. So when we did our signal beacons, we were very, very early and super fortunate that the folks at if this and that let us build one of the kind of earlier community channels where we weren't a big corporation coming in with money and with a big plan, but we had this product that seemed ideal for their platform. And so I basically started reaching out to developers and folks I could find that worked there or via LinkedIn and everything, and finally found some people who thought it would be a great idea to get us, in the beta for creating a channel and stuff. And so we've been through that process now with one product, and I think it would be actually a very interesting way to connect a FizViz or connect a platform like FizViz to a variety of other services. So that's certainly an angle that would make a lot of sense. And I mean, we've done it before. It's their platform is great and it's pretty easy to connect, things like this. So that's certainly an angle. I mean, I think if we went crowdfunding or started imagining this as more of a consumer end user product, that would almost certainly be the way to go.
Wow, so cool. So, so you've kind of already talked on it, but any thoughts for other widgets like what is there? Are there any like crazy widgets you have in mind that might be cool for FizViz that they're just nuts or anything like that? Any like
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I mean, the one thing was our very, very first concept was actually a desktop widget. So the idea was that there would be, a cylindrical display, if you can imagine, maybe the size of a pop bottle or something standing vertical that had a bunch of basically had wraparound LEDs so that you'd have a 360-degree view. And then turntable control on the bottom of it, so you could spin the turntable and spin the data around on the outside of the display, and then click on the wheel, the turntable wheel, in order to switch data streams. Because the idea initially was that you'd be able to not only see what's going on or the current state of it, but you could use the turntable to scroll back and forth through time so that you could go look at your stats. So maybe you got an alert or you wanted to see how many issues were reported that day and whatnot, that there would actually be control that lets you scroll time as well. So that was definitely one of the crazier concepts. And we actually thought about doing that initially, but realized that, we were at that point, we were getting out there a bit in terms of industrial design as well as how users would interpret it and stuff. So we kind of pulled back and went with something a little bit more literal. But certainly I think that concept of adding the element of time and history to it is something that we're definitely interested in, because sometimes the snapshot of the moment in time is key, but sometimes the history is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that is such a cool idea. So you have this project up on Hackster.io, and it looks like you guys won first place in one of their competitions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We won the world's largest Arduino Maker Challenge with it last year, which was incredible. I mean, we really didn't expect to do that. The reason we started on the project was that we were particularly interested in the Maker 1000 and what Arduino had done with the new Atmel cores and the Wi-Fi. It seemed like an ideal platform for us to experiment with some of these ideas on. And then Hackster announced that there was, a contest around the board. And so I initially started brainstorming with the group and just thinking about it, day and night. What could you do with a really, really cool, portable, tiny sort of Wi-Fi module that was easy to use and whatnot? And that was the idea that came out. And so we pulled together the contest entry, and, for our own sake, we wanted to really document the project and share what we had done. And so everybody on the team really put in the extra effort to make the presentation and the quality, not just the quality of the product, but the quality of the documentation and our explanation around it, top notch, so that we could share the idea. And then, and then we really honestly didn't expect it. We knew there'd be a lot of people with great ideas. So when we found out that we had won, it was pretty exciting for sure. And then, specifically the trip to San Francisco to go to Maker Faire Bay Area and all that was just over the top for us, because we had never been down to that show. And our Maker Faire up here in Vancouver is awesome, and we've supported it as long as we've been around, every year. But it's sort of one exhibit hall is the whole Maker Faire. And so when you go down to Bay Area Maker Faire, we had cognitive overload for the entire time, right? Not to mention trying to man a booth with 100,000 or 150,000 visitors coming by. It's like, this is like overload. By the end of the weekend, everybody was just kind of comatose. But it was really, really awesome.
That is so cool. Well, Trent, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It was my pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. What a neat project. What a cool company, neat people working there. That's awesome. We'll make sure to link to the Hackster.io page where the FizViz is on. Definitely want to check out the video. It does look really neat, and the documentation is superb, like we mentioned. Well, if you enjoyed the show, I would love for you to rate and review our show in iTunes. Kind of help spread the word about our podcast. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe to the show. I hope the rest of your day is fantastic, or night, whatever, and have a great one. Talk to you next time. Bye.
This show is produced by Programming Electronics Academy, an online technology education company. We exist to help you create the technology you want in your life. If you are interested in learning more about Arduino, we welcome you to sign up for our free Arduino Crash Course, a 12-part video series with accompanying written lessons designed to teach the basics of programming Arduino. To register for the course, simply text your email address to 440-701-5311, or you can visit programmingelectronics.com and sign up there.